Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are with episode number 31 of the Greenwich Stanford Tea Party Patriots, sponsored by YankeeTea.news. And it's been quite a week, let me tell you. So before I get started, though, I just want to reintroduce something we've shown before, or a couple of things. One is, in talking with people, there's still quite a few parents who are literally terrified of their Board of Education. And so this is dedicated to them. Our plan is to take this around to different boards and to, and take pictures of it, distribute it, because we want to at least acknowledge to the parents who are afraid that we see and understand their fear. And again, I appeal to them to have the courage to step up. For this, one of the shout outs I want to quickly give, and Eric, I got the picture, I'll give it to Eric, of a group that's just started putting up yard signs called ConcernedGreenwichParents.com. And so good for them. And I think this is the kind of thing that needs to be done in order to push back against the Greenwich Board of Education and others. And I want to add that the Greenwich Board of Education, I think, is becoming the center of the storm in this state when it comes to education. And of course, the other thing I wanted to mention before, we still have our Get Well card for the Greenwich Board of Education. We want to at least show some sympathy for them. We are so sorry to hear that you're sick with CRT, SEL, and DEI. Hopefully you will get well. It would be terrible if you got so sick that you had to resign. Okay?
So.
Exactly. Yeah, but I'm not biased at all now, am I? Okay, moving on. So with tonight's things to talk about, it's a lot of local and state stuff, but some national. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is that Wendy Rogers, who's a state senator in Arizona, had been circulating this national letter trying to get state legislators to sign on in order to push forward on doing a real probe into the 2020 election. Well, when it got to Connecticut, turnout and support was a little thin. Now what happened was Rob Sampson, who's a conservative from the Prospect, I think Wolcott area in Connecticut, had denied he ever signed the letter at all. So it seems like Wendy Rogers might have pulled a fast one. But his argument was that she provided insufficient information in order for them to make a determination. It was short of their saying, look, Wendy, you want us to do this, but you haven't really shown us the evidence that convinces us that we should sign on to this letter. So that was the basic problem with that. And in the meantime, Kim Fiorello had also spoken up that she didn't want to really sign on to it, and I think for similar reasons. So it's unfortunate. We're seeing, and then I'm going to talk about Mike Lindell's situation as well, and it just seems like we're hitting a rough patch at the moment, and it's distressing. It's certainly distressing to me. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. Yes, Connecticut Commie of the Week. Yes, this week's Connecticut Commie is Johanna Hayes. Well, you're going to love this one. Who would think there'd be a communist in Congress? What a surprise that is. Well, yes, we've got one. There's another one we'll talk about later called Jim Hines, but tonight we're talking about Johanna Hayes. So the evidence for this is a little hard to come by because, so here's the question. If you have the Communist Party, if you have members associated with the Communist Party, all supporting and speaking out on behalf of Johanna Hayes, I don't know, does that make her a communist? If she's spouting ideas that the Communist Party supports, is she a communist? I don't know. Tell me what you think. YankeeTnews@gmail.com. So here are some names. Leonard C. Yanieli. So he carried on in 2018 about how she was all about fairness and justice. He didn't say social justice, but justice. And I think the question here has to be asked, what has changed? Okay? I think the answer is nothing. And Mr. Yanieli is associated with the Communist Party. Or you can take one in which there's no question of affiliation. That's Joelle Fishman. Joelle Fishman is the president of the Connecticut Communist Party. And she too endorsed Johanna Hayes at various ways at various times. Now, the thing is that when you look at Johanna Hayes' own background, it's not particularly remarkable. She's come up through state schools. She's involved in the Waterbury public education system. And believe it or not, she still has a LinkedIn page that she's a, a talent and, talent and something consultant, which was tied into the public school system. So but she has spoken out against teachers being able to have guns in school to defend themselves. It's like she's never even heard of Sandy Hook. She is all in on Medicare for all, which is this communist idea. It's cradle to grave regulation of your life, basically, through health care. And she's all for that. And there was something else. She supports sanctuary cities, obviously for open borders. She's not what I would call a friend of the United States by any means. So, all right, so that said, let's move on to the next topic, which is Dr. Atlas. Okay, this is a plug. Please, ladies and gentlemen, find the time to make yourselves available December 5th between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the Teen Center at Arch Street in Greenwich, where Dr. Atlas will be speaking. Now, we should point out that the original flyer has on it a $100 suggested donation. It's my understanding that at least for teachers, that's been waived. So basically, you can come in for free, but still the idea is that money needs to be donated because this project is also tied in with a lawsuit that I'll talk about in a minute. And then you should find it online somewhere. We'll post it, all right? We'll make sure that we post it and that you can get access to the proper information. All right, next. This next subject is surety bonds. All right, so I came across, it's sgtreport.com. Now, finding the actual original video, I wasn't able to do. I don't know why it's deep six like it is on the internet. In any event, the point is that there was a parent in Ohio, went before a school board there, and his research showed that surety bonds, which are a form of indemnification of public officials, and basically, when he went before the board, reminded that they're public servants, reminded that they work for them, and he read the statutory language from the state of Ohio concerning the surety bonds, the board unanimously voted to reverse their policy. That is called a victory. So what are these surety bonds? It's still an open question. We're doing research on it, and if anybody out there has any special knowledge about this, it's a form of indemnification, and how it operates in Connecticut is still a little bit of a mystery. But the idea is that these officials who have to have surety bonds in order to hold office, if they're being sued for failing to carry out their duty under the terms and conditions of these surety bonds, among other things, their credit rating will be ruined. It will be in the toilet. So there's a lot to be said for looking into this, and we'll be doing more on it, okay? Now, just to explain it quickly, with respect to the surety bond, it's a three-party deal. There is the person who's taking responsibility. There's the person who's being served, if you will. I like to put it, you, me, them, okay? So you're the official who's taken responsibility. We're the people who are, through taxes, paying for this bond. And then there's the insurance company that's responsible for the bond, okay? And then there's other language that I'm still trying to discover that helps us understand this. All right, meantime, Mike Lindell, WTF. All this talk about being able to file this lawsuit with the Supreme Court on November 23rd failed to come to pass. So now there's finger pointing, and a lot of it's being pointed at the attorney generals who said they were going to step up. Now all of a sudden they're not stepping up. Why? What's going on? I have no idea what the problem is. But clearly this is, in our eyes, this is a huge misstep, a huge problem. This is supposed to be resolved. So, I mean, my suspicion is that there's clearly something going on in the back rooms, even for these Republican attorney generals, that's fouling up the process. So we'll, again, what we have to do is organize and fight. So there are the things that Mike Lindell is asking us to do by all means. But again, there's the sense that there are other groups, other forms of communication that have to be done. I think more heat definitely needs to be directed at the Supreme Court itself because they're taking every opportunity to hide under the robes. So anyway, number 6, Debbie's Deplorables. Debbie's Deplorables, week number 56. Okay, this is a group that has been every week, every single weekend, in front of the Prospect Town Hall, reminding the world that Trump won. Okay, so I was there yesterday, a little cold, and there was some snow on the ground. Didn't have quite as many people. It was like 15 or 20, but that's okay. The spirits are still high. But I just wanted to quickly bring this up because this one guy shows up, an older guy with a beard. We're looking at each other. So we're standing out there and we're saying, you know, it is a little cold out here and some snow, but you know what? So I looked at him and I said, remember the old saying, blood in the snow? He nodded his head. He knew what I was talking about. Now, for you in the audience that don't know what I'm talking about, there was an account of the troops at Valley Forge in the depth of the winter marching. And they were marching without, they were with rags on, they had no boots, rags on their feet, some of them barefoot, and their feet had become chapped, and there was blood in the snow from these soldiers who were marching. By the way, the account was from a journal of a little girl who saw them. She wrote this down, and that's how we found out about it, okay? So what is this? I'm standing here. He knows what I'm talking about. How many other people understand this, okay? It represents our sense of connection to the founding of our country, that we know little things like this, all right? It's important, and others should know about it as well, but it touches on so many things. Anyway, so it was a good get-together. The music, the food, Debbie, she does a great job. Okay, number 7. Now, they're called the Connecticut Educators for Medical Freedom, Inc. This is a teachers group in Greenwich that has finally decided to file suit against the Greenwich Board of Education and the state concerning the masks and the vaccine mandates. And I guess we'll get around to CRT eventually. In any event, so 2 lawyers have been engaged. They are crafting a strategy. I'm not sure what there is to describe about it just yet because it's all still in formation. But one glaring thing in terms of the information is that here was a set of statutes unilaterally put forth by King Lamont, and it turns out that he's not even following his own rules. All right. So where do we find the judge that says, you know what, this is ridiculous, we're ruling in favor of the plaintiff? And somewhere that happens, somewhere, all right? So the other thing that I think is important about this is that people are beginning to come together, all right? Here's a group in Greenwich. They're going to hook up with a group in Stamford, a group in Darien. They're going to hook up with another group that's upstate, and it's just going to grow from there. So the Greenwich Board of Education and to King Lamont, get ready. Then, here's another one, making money on suffering and death. There have been some discussions about to what extent the CDC, the NIH, and even the FDA make money off of these vaccines. It's a little complicated, and I hope to do a more in-depth segment, but under what we'll call convoluted circumstances, yes, the CDC does make money off of patents from intellectual property generated by them, not only for these vaccines, but for other technologies. True also for the NIH. I'm trying to remember, the real Anthony Fauci book, that's by Kennedy, right? Yeah, he talks about this as well. And it's pretty disgusting. It's part of a longer history, and you can't always point fingers at the people you want to point them at. All right, so, but there's something to it, but it's not what it appears. Meantime, the case of, okay, yeah, all right, doctor, you're going to have to let it run a little. So the next part is this woman, Omarova, who was the Marxist put up for the controller of the currency. The good news is that 5 Democrats stood up and said, we can't vote for her. All right, so she's out. Okay, but there's just one problem. It was only 5. What about the other 45? Why do I have a feeling that we have 45 communists in the U.S. Senate? Okay? They couldn't bring themselves to say this woman is not fit for this position for a whole host of reasons. What the hell is going on? All right? So I'm just pointing at that and saying there's a deeper issue here. It's not as it appears, and I don't even know where to begin with it. But there's clearly a problem. If that few Democrats speak up, there's clearly a problem. Okay, and the last thing is just a quick wrap-up about Connecticut. In this last week or so, it's become very obvious to me that there's a growing sense of connections between conservative groups, especially in education. And it's still not where I want it to be. So there's this thing that I propose called the Greater Education Council of Connecticut. And I expect that to take shape. Keep telling you about it as it rolls along. But the point is that it's going to be a vehicle for conservatives to bring all their concern about education to one focus and then use that to push back against CRT and all this other crap that's poisoning our kids' minds. So on that happy note, we'll see you next week. Thanks.